There were flights during the Cold War that never appeared on any radar screen, not because they weren't detected, but because officially they didn't exist. Pilots reported shapes moving faster than anything they'd ever seen. Radar operators tracked objects that appeared and then vanished. Entire aircraft programs were developed, tested, and flown without a single public acknowledgement, because in a world where nuclear war could begin in minutes, the United States wasn't just preparing for the next conflict. It was preparing for the unknown. This is the story of the Pentagon's black projects, the secret programs that operated in total silence, pushed technology beyond its limits, and gave the United States an edge the Soviet Union could never fully understand. At the height of the Cold War, the battlefield was everywhere, on land, in the air, across the oceans, and beyond the atmosphere. But more than anything, it was a war of innovation. The United States and the Soviet Union weren't just competing with weapons. They were racing to discover what came next. Because in a conflict defined by nuclear capability, the difference between stability and catastrophe could come down to a single breakthrough: a faster aircraft, a better detection system, a new way to avoid being seen. Any of these could shift the balance. And that meant staying ahead wasn't optional. It was essential. The problem was traditional military development couldn't keep up. Public programs moved too slowly. They required oversight, transparency, and coordination across multiple agencies. And in a race where speed mattered, those limitations created risk. Because while one side followed established procedures, the other might already be working in the shadows. For the United States, that risk became impossible to ignore. Intelligence reports suggested that the Soviet Union was advancing rapidly. New missile systems, improved radar networks, more capable air defenses. The gap was narrowing, and if it closed completely, the advantage would disappear. The United States needed a way to move faster, to develop technology without delay, without exposure, without giving the Soviet Union time to respond. That solution came in the form of programs that would never be discussed publicly, projects hidden inside classified budgets, operations known only to a select few, entire initiatives that, on paper, did not exist. These were the black projects. They operated under extreme secrecy, not just from the public, but often from other parts of the government. Information was tightly controlled, access was limited, and even those working on the projects rarely understood the full picture. Engineers solved problems without knowing the final application. Pilots tested aircraft without discussing what they flew. Decisions were made in small rooms by small groups with enormous consequences. Because the goal wasn't just to build new technology, it was to build it first, and to keep it hidden until it was ready. Secrecy wasn't a preference. It was a weapon. If the Soviet Union knew what was being developed, they could prepare for it, design countermeasures, close the gap. But if they didn't know, they couldn't respond. And in the Cold War, that uncertainty could shift the balance of power. Entire facilities were constructed in remote locations, far from cities, far from observation. Deserts became testing grounds. Restricted airspace became laboratories, places where aircraft would fly without being seen, and ideas could be tested without interference. These weren't ordinary bases. They were isolated environments, built specifically to support projects that could not be revealed. And inside them, the rules were different. Failure wasn't punished. It was expected, because pushing the limits meant accepting risk, trying things that had never been done, operating at the edge of what was possible. Some projects failed. Others succeeded in ways no one had anticipated. But all of them contributed to a larger objective: to create capabilities that the Soviet Union could not match. Not yet, maybe not ever. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where the most important breakthroughs happen far from public view, consider subscribing, because what emerged from these black projects would go on to redefine warfare itself. From the outside, the world remained unchanged. Airfields looked empty. Deserts were silent. The skies seemed clear. But behind that silence, the future was already being built. And once it emerged, it would change the balance of the Cold War forever. Inside those remote facilities, the work moved at a pace the outside world would never see. No press releases, no public timelines, no explanation of what was being built or why. Only progress, measured in tests, in failures, in breakthroughs that happened behind locked doors. One of the first frontiers these black projects pushed was speed, because in the early years of the Cold War, speed meant survival. Aircraft that could fly higher and faster than enemy defenses offered a critical advantage, allowing the United States to gather intelligence, penetrate contested airspace, and return before interception was even possible. But as Soviet radar and missile systems improved, that advantage began to fade. High altitude was no longer enough. Speed alone wasn't enough. Something more was needed, something that didn't rely on outrunning the threat, but on avoiding it entirely. That idea led to one of the most revolutionary concepts of the Cold War, stealth. At first, it sounded almost impossible. How do you hide an aircraft from radar? How do you reduce something moving at hundreds of miles per hour to something that appears invisible? The answer wasn't simple. It required a complete rethinking of design. Engineers began experimenting with shapes that defied conventional aerodynamics. Flat surfaces, sharp angles, structures that scattered radar waves instead of reflecting them. Materials were developed to absorb signals. Edges were refined. Profiles minimized. Everything about the aircraft changed. Because now, performance wasn't just measured by speed or altitude. It was measured by what the enemy could not see. Early prototypes looked strange, unstable, unlike anything that had flown before. But inside those designs was a breakthrough, because when tested, the results were clear. Radar systems struggled to detect them. Tracking became unreliable. Engagement became uncertain. For the first time, it was possible to enter defended airspace without triggering a response. At the same time, other black projects continued to push the limits of performance in different ways. High-speed reconnaissance platforms were refined. Sensors improved. Navigation systems became more precise. Aircraft could gather more information in less time with greater accuracy. Each improvement wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger system, a network of capabilities designed to extend awareness, to reduce blind spots, to ensure that the United States could observe before being observed. But the innovation didn't stop in the air. Some of the most important developments happened in the invisible domain of signals. Electronic intelligence, systems designed to intercept communications, to analyze transmissions, to detect patterns that revealed movement, intention, and capability. This was a different kind of warfare, not based on direct engagement, but on understanding, because knowing what the adversary was doing before they acted was a form of power, and that power could prevent conflict before it began. Early warning systems became another critical focus. Radar networks expanded. Detection capabilities improved. The ability to identify missile launches in real time became essential, because in a nuclear world, even a few minutes of warning could determine everything. Response, survival, decision. Each of these systems work together, not as separate projects, but as parts of a larger strategy. A strategy built on anticipation, on staying ahead, on ensuring that the United States would never be caught unprepared. But as these capabilities grew, so did the complexity of keeping them hidden, because the more advanced the technology became, the harder it was to conceal. Test flights left traces. Unusual signals appeared on radar. Observers began to notice patterns that didn't match known systems. Rumors started to spread, unconfirmed sightings, reports of aircraft that didn't exist, movements that couldn't be explained. And while most of it remained speculation, some of it came close to the truth, because even the most secret programs leave behind evidence. And in the Cold War, even a hint of something new could change how the other side reacted, which meant that secrecy had to be managed just as carefully as innovation, because if the world began to understand what was being built, the advantage could disappear. Or worse, it could trigger a response before the system was ready. And that risk was always present, because in a race defined by secrecy, being seen at the wrong moment could change everything. The more these programs advanced, the harder it became to keep them contained, because innovation leaves a trail, not always a clear one. not always understood, but enough to raise questions. Soviet radar stations began detecting anomalies, objects moving at unexpected speeds, appearing briefly, then disappearing. Interceptors were launched, only to find empty sky. Tracking systems struggled to maintain contact with targets that didn't behave like anything in their databases. To the Soviet Union, something was changing, and they didn't fully understand what. That uncertainty created tension, because in the Cold War, not knowing was dangerous. It forced assumptions, worst-case scenarios, and those assumptions could influence decisions at the highest levels. Inside the United States, that effect was understood because black projects weren't just about capability. They were about perception. What the adversary believed mattered almost as much as what actually existed. If Soviet leadership suspected that the United States had developed aircraft they couldn't detect, systems they couldn't track, technologies they couldn't counter, it introduced hesitation, caution, a pause before escalation. And in a nuclear environment, even a moment of hesitation could prevent a crisis from becoming something irreversible. But managing that perception required precision. Reveal too much, and the advantage would be lost. Reveal too little, and the impact would be limited. The balance had to be exact. Some capabilities were allowed to be seen, just enough to suggest advancement. Others remained completely hidden, reserved for scenarios where their use would be decisive. At the same time, black projects continued expanding into new areas, not just aircraft, not just detection, but control. Systems designed to influence how the battlefield functioned. Electronic warfare capabilities that could disrupt communications, interfere with radar, and alter the way information flowed. In modern terms, it would be called information dominance. But during the Cold War, it was something new and largely invisible. Because these systems didn't leave physical traces. They operated through signals, through interference, through subtle changes that could shift outcomes without direct confrontation. To an outside observer, it might look like confusion, a radar system failing, a communication breakdown, a delay that couldn't be explained. But behind those effects were capabilities developed in total secrecy, capabilities that allowed the United States to shape situations without revealing how. And that was the essence of black projects, not just building better weapons, but redefining how power was applied, quietly, precisely, without drawing attention. Still, even within the system, there were limits, because no matter how controlled the environment was, human factors remained. People talked, questions were asked, and occasionally information slipped through, not enough to expose entire programs, but enough to create speculation, stories about hidden bases, about aircraft that didn't appear in official records, about technologies that seemed too advanced for their time. Some of it was dismissed, some of it exaggerated, but at its core, there was truth, and that truth became harder to contain as the years went on. Because eventually, the moment comes when secrecy gives way to reality, when a system moves from testing to operation, when it leaves the shadows and enters the world. And when that happens, everything changes, because what was once hidden becomes part of the balance, part of the strategy, part of the equation that defines how both sides move forward. And in the Cold War, those moments didn't just reveal technology. They revealed just how far ahead the race had already gone. In the end, the black projects were never meant to stay hidden forever. Some remained classified for decades. Others were revealed slowly, piece by piece, as their technologies entered active service. And when they did, the world finally saw what had been built in silence. Aircraft that could fly faster than anything ever deployed. Platforms that could enter defended airspace without detection. Systems that could gather intelligence with a level of precision that had once seemed impossible. What had started as secret experiments became operational reality. And the impact was immediate, because once these capabilities were revealed, even partially, they changed how the Cold War was understood. The United States wasn't just keeping pace. It was shaping the future of warfare, quietly, deliberately, and often far ahead of what anyone had expected. But the true power of these black projects wasn't just in what they created. It was in what they prevented. By maintaining a technological edge, the United States reduced the risk of surprise, reduced the chance of miscalculation, and ensured that decisions could be made with greater clarity. Because in a conflict defined by uncertainty, clarity was power. The Soviet Union could develop new systems, improve their defenses, expand their capabilities, but they were always operating with a degree of doubt. What else had been built? What else was hidden? What capabilities existed that hadn't been revealed yet? And that doubt mattered because it influenced behavior. It introduced caution. It slowed escalation. And in a nuclear world, slowing escalation could mean everything. The Black Projects created a form of strategic pressure that didn't rely on direct confrontation. It didn't require visible force. It operated through possibility, through the idea that there were capabilities beyond what could be measured, and that idea alone could shape decisions. But these programs also revealed something deeper about the nature of power during the Cold War, because strength wasn't just about what could be seen. It was about what could be controlled. The ability to develop advanced systems without exposure, to test, refine, and deploy technologies without interference, to operate in a space where innovation could move faster than observation. That was a form of advantage that couldn't be easily countered, and it required more than resources. It required discipline, coordination, and a level of strategic intelligence that extended far beyond individual projects, because every decision had consequences. Every program influenced the broader balance, and every breakthrough had to be managed carefully so that it strengthened stability instead of disrupting it. During one of the most dangerous periods in human history, that balance held, not perfectly, not without risk, but effectively enough to prevent the worst-case scenario. And behind that outcome were countless efforts that never appeared in public records, projects that operated in silence, decisions made without recognition, technologies developed far from the world's attention, because the Cold War wasn't just fought in visible arenas. It was fought in laboratories, in restricted facilities, in places where the future was being built long before anyone else could see it. Today, the legacy of those Black Projects continues. Modern military systems, advanced aircraft, and intelligence capabilities all trace their origins back to those early, hidden programs. The ideas developed in secrecy became the foundation for what followed, and the principle remains the same. Stay ahead, stay unseen, control what others cannot, because in the end, the most powerful advantage isn't always the one you display. It's the one your adversary can't fully understand, the one that forces them to hesitate, to reconsider, to hold back. And in the Cold War, that hesitation helped prevent a conflict that could have changed the world forever. If you found this story as compelling as we did, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because some of the most important chapters of history weren't written in public. They were written in secret.